Good morning. How y'all doing? I wanted to talk a little bit today about counting the cost of following Christ. And I talked a little bit about it last time, but I wanted to get more in depth with that because, in all honesty, following Christ is going to cost you something. Um, you always hear the good news is free, but it's going to cost you everything. And it will. Following Christ costs you something. If you've been following Christ for any length of time and it hasn't cost you anything, probably going to want to do some self evaluation and see where you're at. Um, so I wanted to look at a story in Luke chapter 14. Um, Jesus had multitudes of crowds following him, and he wants total commitment from the people that follow him. He's not looking for half-heartedness or convenience. He wants total commitment at all times. So he had vast amounts of crowds that were following him, and he decided to put them to the test. So I'm going to read, it's Luke chapter 14. I'm going to read at verse 25. It says, "Now great crowds were traveling with him. So he turned and said to them, 'If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whomever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, wanting to build a tower, doesn't first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it? Or what king, going to war against another king, will not first sit down and decide if he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000? So I can imagine the crowd's reaction when he says, if you don't hate your own, mother, father, wife, children, and whatnot. I can't imagine their reaction to that. Even today, people, wait a minute, that's not the Jesus I heard about. He's telling me to hate my family. And he's not literally saying you need to hate your family. That's not what he's saying. He's not doing away with the commandment to honor your mother and father. And the Apostle James, he even says, if you don't take care of your family, you're no better than the pagans. So you need to understand in context what he's saying and what he's testing them. He's saying that your love for him should be greater. That your love for him should be so great that you're willing to let these other, if need be, these other relationships will be let go of. In another, I don't have it on hand, but another part of the Bible, he said he's a sword. He brings division against mother, father, husband, wife, brother, sister, because one will believe and the other won't. And eventually that's going to cause conflict here. And you're going to have to decide Jesus or this other relationship. And Jesus is saying, me. And rightfully so. And you hear this a lot. I see it a lot. And I don't think that people realize what they're saying. But you hear people all the time saying, my children are my world, or my wife is my world, my husband is my world. And I just cringe every time I hear that. I'm just like, no, Jesus is my world. It's because he is my world and that he comes first that these other relationships thrive and benefit from that. When he's second or third or just not even on the list in your life, if he's the convenient part of your life, these other relationships are going to be so much less than what they could have been. And some of them will even fall apart. It's like when I got married, I told my wife, She can trust me because, not because of my relationship with her, but because of my relationship with Christ. She can trust that I will be faithful to her because I was faithful to Jesus first. And still, my relationship with him defines my marriage. I'm not going to run off and do something crazy or be unfaithful to her, because no matter what's happening between us, I'm still faithful to Jesus Christ. I mean, there's no question about it. So she can trust in that. And it's like when Jesus says, you bear your own cross. He's not literally saying we're all going to go to a cross. What he's saying, his purpose was to go to the cross. And he's saying, we follow him in obedience to our purpose. That's what taking up your cross, bearing, what he has for you, bearing that purpose in his plan in obedience to him is bearing your cross. And he's also, some people have brought this up before, and it's not what he's saying. He's also not saying sell everything you own, go live in a cave and eat worms for the rest of your life. That he's not saying that either. He's make him your priority. That's what he's saying. And he's inviting you to count the cost of it. He's saying, leave, it's going to cost you your old life. That's probably the number one cost of following Christ, is your old life. That's what he is saying. Because to follow him, you need to leave that old life behind. The crowds, they wanted the benefits of Jesus. They had the free food, they had the signs and the wonders. Nobody will ever be sick again. He spoke about, the bread of life and living water. They wanted the benefits of Jesus, but that's not what he's asking. You don't get Jesus to get the benefits. You go to Jesus to get Jesus. That's what he wants in our hearts. We just want him. So, and he brought this challenge up, and then, the going started to get tough, a little bit too tough for them, and many of them walked away. So, we're going to skip over to John chapter 6, and I'm going to start at verse 60. He says, therefore, when many of his disciples heard this, they said, his teaching is hard. Who can accept it? And there was just such a conflict between man-made religion and traditions that these people could not accept Jesus. They wanted their religion. Their religion was safe and comfortable, and they knew how to deal with it. But Jesus is not safe. He's not comfortable. He's going to pull us out of our comfort zones. And, we need to obey that. When he said, whoever eats this bread and drinks his water will never be hungry or thirsty again. I mean, they were all for that. Free stuff. Until he said, he is the manna. He's the bread of life. He is that water of life. He himself is what the people need. And wait a minute. That's not what I signed up for. I'm here for the free stuff. And they walked away. Count the cost. People came to Christ because of the benefits, not for the promise of Jesus himself. Jesus himself is the benefit. And that people are sold on this lie that the Christian life is hugs, kisses, and springtime flowers. God is love, and he's just going to pour all this love on you, and it's going to be great. And there is some truth to that, but you're missing the whole point, and you're missing everything that Jesus is. God disciplines, he sanctifies, he prunes us, and that's painful. When that comes, it's just like the people before. This is hard, and they walk away. This isn't what I signed up for, and they walk away. They didn't count the cost before coming to Christ. And a lot of times it really depends on you. How tight is your grip on these things that Jesus is trying to remove from your life, especially the sinful things. Sometimes the stuff he prunes from our life is not necessarily sinful. It just isn't what we need for the season. It needs to go because it's in the way of something else he wants to do. So he's not getting rid of it because it's sinful. He's getting rid of it because it's in the way. And depending on how tight your grip on that is how painful it's going to be. Especially relationships. When you're just in a bad relationship that is pulling you away from Christ, and he's trying to get that relationship out of your life, and you're just holding on to it so desperately, it's painful because he's ripping it from your life and you're holding on to it, so it's ripping you. Just make Jesus your priority, and when he takes those things out, it's not nearly as painful. The pruning, the sanctification, the discipline, not nearly as painful. Even when, and a lot of times it seems like when these painful things are happening, people the attitude is, well, I was doing everything right. How come this is happening? And again, it's coming back to that idea that, hugs, kisses, and springtime flowers. It's not supposed to be this way. It's all supposed to be all love all the time. And people don't understand when these painful things come. And that's another cost of following Jesus, is the world hates you. They're going to hate you for it. And it's not personally against you. They hate him first. If you did what the world wanted you to do, they would love you, accept you as their own. But that makes you an enemy of God. Peter says to be a friend of the world is to make you an enemy of God. So again, counting the cost. Am I going to follow Jesus in his ways, or am I going to follow the world in their ways? It just reminds me and makes me think about, here in America, we've had it pretty easy for a long while. I mean, you go overseas and people just, I don't know, they just choose to remain in ignorance about this, I guess. But you go overseas and following Jesus will cost you your life. I mean, it will literally cost you your life. In Africa, there's entire villages that get slaughtered because they refused to renounce Christ and convert to Islam. In Iran, in China, they go to church in a cave. In Iran, the underground churches, and it's not there anymore, but when the Berlin Wall was up in East Germany, it was the underground church. They had to meet in secret, or they would be killed or thrown in jail for the rest of their life. We don't face that here in America, so we really don't think about counting the cost, but it's not like when I was a kid and, there was at least culture Christianity where you were mostly tolerated because of culture. They weren't really following Christ, but at least they had some level of belief in a God. And that made it easier for the genuine followers of Christ to, practice Christianity. But we're not really seeing that anymore. The culture is shifting, and more every day, the culture is becoming hostile to God and the things of God. And that is going to include the people of God. And nothing puts your faith to the test is when it's going to cost you. I mean, really cost you. And that's what brings me to thinking about, the wedding industry. It's pretty limited to the wedding industry right now, but I have a feeling it's going to expand here in the next decade. But, Christian bakers, cake bakers, flowers, photography, they're faced with a choice. They want to support a homosexual wedding with their business and endorse that, or do they want to stand firm on the Word of God? And many of them, and I praise God for them, they chose to stand firm on the Word of God, and it cost them everything. cost them their home, cost them their business. They got death threats. As far to the best of my knowledge, none of them have been killed, but I'm going to say yet. And that might be on our horizon if things continue the way they are. But they lost everything. Some of them face fines up to $120,000, $150,000. I mean, I don't got that laying around. You got that laying around? They lost their business, they lost their homes, and in a lot of cases they lost friends and family. People just they didn't want to be associated with them, so they just abandoned them. The same way when the Roman guard or the Jewish guard came for Jesus, they all ran. They didn't want to be associated with that trouble. And these people, they have some support, but they lost a lot. But they lost it following Jesus. And you can be thrown in jail. And I think about Stephen, preaching the gospel on the street. The Jews told him to knock it off, and he refused. And he was stoned to death right there on the city street. The first martyr recorded in the Bible. And I think about that, are we willing to do that? If we're talking about Jesus and somebody says, stop talking or I'll fire you. Stop talking about Jesus or we'll cancel our contract. I'll disinvite you from birthday party, barbecue. We'll no longer be friends, or heaven forbid, they will unfriend you on Facebook. I mean, that's a lot of people, that's their reality. In verse 61 of John chapter 6, Jesus, knowing in himself that the disciples were complaining about this, asked them, does this offend you? He's asking us, does it offend you? The exclusivity of Christ. Does it offend you that Jesus says he is the only way? I just read a article the other day about something like, I can't remember. It was something like 60% of supposed evangelicals don't even believe that Jesus is the only way to heaven. I'm like floored by that. How can you be a Christian and say Jesus isn't the only way? It's like, if he's not the only way, why are you a Christian? Why bother? Why did Jesus bother? Why didn't he just say, oh, there's this other way? Why did he go to the cross to make a way if there was another way? He would have just said, oh, I don't need to do this. Go the other way and do that. It'll work. How absurd is that? If you don't believe, you don't believe. We can't force you to believe, but don't be halfway and say, well, I believe, but he's not the only way. Why are you believing? What's the point? They're there for the benefits. They want the free stuff, the signs and wonders. Jesus is the talk of the town. It's the cool thing to do. But it's going to cost me something, so I'm going to go look for this other way now. They're just going to pack up and leave. So does it offend you that Jesus says he's the only way? Does it offend you that sexual purity is commanded by God? It's so crystal clear, and yet people just, I'll do my own thing. Does it offend you that marriage is between one man and one woman? Crystal clear. And that's it. Or God clearly says, male and female, he created them. Are you offended by that? Is that going to cause you to walk away? Or for a lot of people, they don't walk away. They just say, I believe in everything else, but that part I don't believe in. Again, you can't do that. That's not going to get you anywhere with Christ. I'm telling you that with all the love in my heart for you. I'm not telling you that because I want you to go away. I want you to get the full benefit of your relationship with Christ by putting that old stuff away, getting rid of those old beliefs, getting rid of those old way of thinking, that old worldview, the world's way of doing stuff, and going all in with Jesus. That's where you're going to find true life. That's where you're going to find the full benefit of the relationship with Christ, which is you just have him. He himself. And that's the full benefit. And nothing will set you apart faster, especially nowadays, is if you refuse the LBGTQ agenda, transgender movement. Nothing will set you apart faster than that. In our current season, there might come a day it might be something else. I mean, the world's always coming up with new ways to defy God. I'm sure it'll be something else in 10, 15 years, but that's what it is for today. Nothing will set you apart faster than that. Nothing you will get you persecuted faster than that. All those things we just talked about: losing jobs, losing friends, losing anything else. That's the fastest way to do it. And again, do I choose Jesus or do I choose the world's way of thinking? Or am I going to go halfway and then it'll be made pretty clear who I follow not too long after that? But I also want to make crystal clear that he is worth it. He is absolutely worth it. This other junk that we hold on to, that we're just have such a tight grip on because we think we have to, even the highest human relationship, mother, father, spouse, a loved one, a girlfriend, when following Christ is going to cost some of those too, but he's worth it. Now, let me back up. He is not telling you to go get a divorce. That's not what he's telling you. Especially people that both unbelievers get married and then later on one comes to Christ and one doesn't. And the Apostle Paul has a lot to say about that. And that's not the purpose of this sermon, so I will just encourage you to look that up. But I'm not encouraging people to go get divorced. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's going to cause tension, especially if you're not married yet. It's going to cause tension with your siblings. And my wife and I, Erin, it's cost us some relationships. I think every year, I think my circle of friends gets smaller and smaller. Barbecues start to disappear. Holidays start to disappear. But you'll get new ones. Jesus is worth it. There's going to be other people out there that feel the same way you do. Jesus is worth it. Go to a barbecue with them. Go to a birthday party with them. And I know it's terrible and some people can't do that, but you do have the family of God and you have Christ and he is worth it. And that brings me to the most, just to me, the most tragic verse in the Bible. And I don't think it's a coincidence. It's John chapter 6, verse 66. From that moment, many of his disciples turned back and no longer accompanied him. Therefore, Jesus said to the 12, "You don't want to go away too, do you?" That's just unbelievable to me, but there it is. And even now you see it. It's people turn back. It's too hard. I have this friend or I have this relationship or I have this job or I got this much money. I don't want to give it up. And you can pretend for a while, but eventually there's just going to come a moment where Jesus is not going to tolerate lukewarmness anymore. He's going to put something in your life that is going to make it crystal clear. Do you choose that thing, or are you choosing Jesus? And a lot of people, they turn back and no longer follow him. And I mean, this message is probably going to cause people to question, but Jesus is asking, you don't want to go away too, do you? I'm hoping you don't. But persecution, tough times, people being offended, an actual cost, when it costs you something to follow Jesus, it's gonna weed out the ones who don't belong. You know, the lukewarm ones who haven't solidified in their heart that I am all in for Christ. It's only going to last for so long. I mean, some people, amazingly, they can last several years, decades, faking it. But at some point, when a real cost comes, they're going to turn back. And for the ones that stay, for the ones that do stay, for the ones that say, you know what, I haven't been as committed as I should be, but from today forward, I'm all in with Christ. Praise God for that. And their faith is going to be a lot stronger, and yours will too. Once you make that full commitment, saying, you know what, I am going to pay this price. I am going to let that thing go because he's worth it. Your faith is going to be so much stronger because you're invested now. It cost you something. You're invested. And, just remember, I always think about what Peter said. I love Peter's response. Verse 68. When Jesus asked him, do you want to go away too? Peter replies in verse 68, where would I go? There's nowhere else to go. Peter recognized, where would I go? I don't even know where those people are going to go. They're going to go back to their old way of life, and just death and destruction is what awaits them. Peter's like, I'm staying right here. You got the words of life. You are life. So, the number one thing Jesus is trying to get them to understand, he himself is the bread of life and living river of living water. Where would I go? Who else has this? Who could compare? I love that song. You have no rival. You have no equal. That's we need to get that in our hearts. Not sometimes I'm often praying. I'm like, God, there's no one else but you. But you know what? Even if there was, I still don't want them. I want you. Let's get that in our hearts. I got a ways to go too, but let's get it in our hearts. I want Jesus and nothing else. Nothing else will satisfy. Nothing else will do. Whatever it costs me, he's worth it. I just thought of it, and I don't have it written down, but that the parable, my loose translation, you find a pearl or a treasure out in the middle of a field, and nobody else knows it's there, so you go by the field knowing that the treasure's there, and you go by the field, and now the treasure's yours. Jesus he's talking about himself. He is the treasure that so few people tragically don't discover. Broad is the way to hell. Narrow is the way to life. Narrow is the way to him. So I hope that this is by no means a condemning message. I'm not trying to condemn no one. I'm trying to challenge you to a deeper, more meaningful relationship with Christ. And I just want you to know he's worth it. Whatever the cost is, it'll cost you something different than it cost me. It'll cost, us, someone else, something totally different. And I don't know, everybody's life circumstances are different. I don't know what's in your life and what's not in your life, but whatever that cost is for you, I want you to know He's worth it. Whatever it is, He's worth it. All right. So God bless everyone, and I am definitely praying for you, and I hope you have an excellent rest of the week. Take care.